Hi, it's real story of my life. Like these stories, subscribe me. The town of Albersheim lay draped in silence as the evening mist rolled through its cobblestone streets. In a sprawling villa on the edge of town, Claudia stood by the bay window, her slender fingers tracing the cold glass. Her husband, Martin, had just left for another business trip, a routine so familiar it no longer felt unusual. Yet, this time, her heart felt heavier than usual, burdened by something unspoken. Across the hall, Lucas, Martin's son, watched her from the shadows. There was an unplaceable tension in the air, a silent rhythm only they could hear. The first crack. Lucas wasn't like other young men his age. Reserved, calculated, and intense, he carried an aura that made people uneasy. Since his mother's passing, he'd been adrift, trying to find his place in a family that never truly felt like his own. Claudia, with her kindness and elegance, had always been the glue that held this fractured household together. That evening, Claudia set the table for two, a rare moment shared between them. They dined in silence until Lucas spoke, his voice low and steady. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if things were different?" Claudia looked up, startled. "Different how?" "If you hadn't married my father," he said, his gaze piercing. Her breath caught, the question too daring, too dangerous. "Lucas, why would you ask that?" He shrugged, but his eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like we're all pretending." The storm within. That night, a fierce thunderstorm swept through the town. Power outages plunged the villa into darkness, leaving only the faint glow of candlelight. Claudia, uneasy in the silence, wandered into the living room, where she found Lucas stoking the fireplace. "You don't have to stay awake," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I couldn't sleep," he replied without looking at her. She sat down across from him, the firelight casting flickering shadows on their faces. "Lucas, what's been bothering you lately? You've seemed different." He hesitated, then looked directly at her. "Maybe it's because every time he leaves, I feel like I become someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who doesn't feel invisible." His words struck a chord deep within her. Claudia realized she, too, felt invisible when Martin was around, like an accessory to his perfect life. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling, "you're not invisible. Not to me." A dangerous stance. The days stretched into an unbearable intimacy. They cooked together, shared quiet conversations, and exchanged glances that lingered just a little too long. It was as if Martin's absence had unlocked a door they both feared to walk through. One evening, while tending to the garden, Claudia accidentally pricked her finger on a thorn. Lucas rushed to her side, taking her hand gently in his. "You should be more careful," he said, his voice a mix of concern and something deeper. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the world around them disappeared. Claudia pulled her hand away, her cheeks flushed. This isn't right," she whispered, more to herself than to him. But the line between right and wrong had begun to blur, and they both knew it. The night of reckoning. On the eve of Martin's return, the storm that had been brewing between them finally broke. Lucas found Claudia in the study, staring at a photograph of her and Martin. "I don't know who I am anymore," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. Lucas stepped closer, his voice firm yet tender. "You're stronger than you think. You don't need to be defined by him or anyone else." "Then why do I feel so weak?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Because strength isn't about not feeling, it's about knowing when to walk away," he said, his eyes dark with emotion. Before she could respond, he leaned in, his lips hovering just inches from hers. Time seemed to freeze as Claudia wrestled with the storm inside her. But then, with a force that surprised them both, she pulled away. "No," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "We can't do this." Lucas nodded, his face a mask of pain and understanding. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The aftermath. When Martin returned the next morning, the house seemed as it always did. Orderly, calm, perfect. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Lucas announced his decision to move out, citing a desire for independence. As he packed his belongings, Claudia stood in the doorway, her heart heavy. "Lucas," she began, but words failed her. He turned to her, a small, bittersweet smile on his lips. "It's better this way." As he walked out the door, Claudia felt a pang of loss so deep it left her breathless. But she knew it was the right thing to do. A memory etched in shadows. In the years that followed, neither Claudia nor Lucas spoke of that time. But every now and then, when the rain fell and the thunder rolled, they would think of each other, of the connection they had shared, the boundaries they had nearly crossed, and the strength it took to let go. Some stories, they realized, were meant to remain unfinished. Love and desire can test the strongest of wills, but true strength lies in knowing when to walk away from what could destroy everything.